Our next story is about defense, about India's drive to mobilize drones at the border. This drive has hit a snag. India's defense ministry has had to cancel a deal. Reports say it was an order for 400 drones. That order has been cancelled. The reason? The drones were found to contain Chinese parts. Let's look at the details. Here's what we know. 400 drone deliveries were reportedly cancelled. They were all logistics drones. These are usually the quadcopter kind, like the ones used by Amazon and other e-commerce platforms to make drone deliveries. As the name suggests, they're used for logistical support, to fly things like ammunition, medicine and other supplies to remote areas. Now, in India's case, the drones were meant for operations along the LAC, the line of actual control, the de facto border between India and China. Now, what's the bare minimum you would expect here? Knowing that these drones were heading to the India-China border, they should be China-proof, right? The drones should not have any vulnerabilities to Chinese hacking. That is the minimum expectation. But unfortunately, the exact opposite happened. India discovered that these drones contained Chinese components, potentially giving Beijing a backdoor into the drones. And here's how the vulnerability was discovered. India has been buying logistics drones for a while now. One supplier is a Chennai-based firm called Dhaksha Unmanned Systems. It has supplied drones in the past. Their previous batch has been in use, but 2 incidents took place last year. The first was at the LAC in eastern Ladakh. One drone refused to take off. That was the first incident. The Indian Armed Forces assumed that it was a malfunction, but they investigated it. Then a second incident took place last August. This was along the India-Pakistan border in the Rajouri sector. The Indian Army lost control of one of the drones. It flew off into Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And the Indian forces could not explain it. That is when a crackdown on the drones began. India put on hold acquisitions from Dhaksha Unmanned Systems to investigate its supply chains. And now it seems that 3 orders have been cancelled, plus India's defense ministry is updating its security procedures. A stringent mechanism is reportedly being put in place to ensure that no Chinese components or electronics are used. Remember, India already has a domestic requirement for drones. The manufacturers have to be Indian entities, and they are given preference based on the amount of indigenous components used. However, there is still some scope for foreign components, and this loophole seems to have been exploited. Indian firms using Chinese drone components is inexcusable. We've had directives in place for this since the year 2010 about Chinese parts in Indian security equipment. But the global drone sector is heavily reliant on China. Beijing controls 90% of the world's commercial drone supplies, 90%, and 70% is controlled by a single Chinese company, SZDJI Technology Co. Limited, or simply known as DJI. They control 70% of the global commercial drone market. Parts, electronics, engines, you name it, they sell all of it. And with such dominance, the cost advantage is tangible, so firms tend to opt for Chinese parts. But India should have zero tolerance for this. Despite all the talk of normalizing ties and resuming flights, this is defense. It should be non-negotiable. You cannot allow a potential enemy state to have a backdoor into your equipment. Hopefully, India's private defense manufacturers understand this, and this debacle is not repeated. We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we put together for you. Touted as the minimum defense from that video. India's neighbors were the first to send the special edition of Vantage live from the White House throughout this week. Hindu Mandir we're on our way to Tel Aviv. Measure, but it's also the perfect way to drive.
I don't think that
Prime Minister of Bhutan, Sherin Tagwe. Welcome to
60% of the world's
office. Prime Minister Modi did the iron.
We were actually
How are you doing? How do you like it? It's been 1 year since that meeting. Iron bars separate you from the outside. Out the vote efforts. Trump had, it says, and at $4.3 trillion. 300 billion by 2030. That's what we need to tackle climate change.